Welcome to part 17 in this series on creating a simple purchase order system using Blazor and C#. In this video, we'll start looking at editing an order. In the previous video, we looked at viewing an order and discovered a couple of problems when we were trying to edit an order line. First of all, the product drop-down box was blank. And secondly, the tax ID drop-down, although it was populated, didn't display the record for the current item. And we'll look at those items to start with. Just to recap on the situation we discovered at the end of the last video, I've entered just one purchase order and we'll try and edit it. So we can view the order, that's fine, but if we choose one of the order lines and choose to edit that, we find that the product is blank and the tax rate is blank. And furthermore, the product drop-down has no records in it, although the tax rate does, but we aren't bringing back the actual tax rate that was used on this order line. Okay, so let's look at the code and see what we need to change. Let's start with the product drop-down first. And if we look at the dialog, we'll see that the drop-down list, the data source for the drop-down list is product. And if we then discover where that's being populated, we find that that's being populated on the change of supplier. But the situation is that when we're editing an order, the supplier is already there and we're not allowing the user to change the supplier. So we aren't firing the on-change supplier event. So what we need to do is find an alternative place to populate the product and to make sure it's only populated with the products for the relevant supplier. And I decided that the place for this would actually be on the toolbar click handler when we went to edit. So by that stage, the supplier is in place and we're choosing to edit and we can populate it then. Then I had second thoughts about that and I thought, well, actually it would be better if we placed it up here so that whether the user was adding or editing an order line, we would always have the product list populated at that point and there'd be no need to actually have it on the change supplier event. So what we need is to effectively move this from the on-change supplier to the toolbar click handler. So if I copy that and come down here and paste it, that's where we want it. But we will discover there's a couple of problems here. We're not getting the item data supplier ID because we're not using the drop-down. What we do have though is the order add edit PO header supplier ID. So if I remove that and I'll copy that. Header supplier ID. So that should fix that. But having moved this down here, we don't need it up here at all. So I don't like having code in two places where it's effectively redundant or duplicating each other. So I've removed that. And now we've got a squiggly line under on-change supplier. And that's because it's an asynchronous task and none of this is awaiting anything. So we can just change that to be void. and we should find that that problem goes away. I'm going to run it very quickly just to check that that's working. Right, select our order, select edit, select an order line, select edit, and we've got the product that the order line refers to, and we've got a drop-down list as well. So that's right, we've still got tax to deal with. And let's get back to tax. Now, at the outset, I was trying to be too clever. In the PO line model, I didn't save the PO line tax ID to the database, i.e. the ID of the tax rate that was being selected. I didn't think it was going to be necessary because we were saving the PO line tax rate, and I thought it was only the rate that was going to change. And that might be true, but because we haven't got the ID, we can't populate that rate drop-down box. So that was my mistake. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I think the lesson to be learned here is if you've got joins between tables, always make sure that you include those joins in the database tables. I'm now going to go to SQL Server because we've got some changes to make. At the moment, if I look at the design of the PO line, see we haven't got the PO line tax ID, and that's what we want. We're now also snookered because I've got an order in there. So I'm going to delete all the data. And this is the reset PO header and lines script from previously. And I'll execute it. So that will have deleted the order header and the order rows. Now what we need to do is change the design of this. I could either script it or I could just change it in design. I'm going to script it. I'm going to drop and create. And what we need is PO line tax rate. So I'll copy that. Sorry, tax ID is what we want. It's an integer. Therefore, we don't need that information, but we will keep it not null. So let's parse it and execute it. So we've now got the table. If I refresh it, I'll probably have to refresh first. Look at the design. We've now got PO line tax ID. But that leaves us with some stored procedures. All the PO line items are probably wrong. So let's go through them one by one and just add in the PO line tax ID. So this one's relatively straightforward. This is a bit tedious, but basically has to be done. Right, I think I've changed all the PO line stored procedures. Hopefully I've got them correct. So now we can go back to the code. Now we don't actually need to change the model, although this comment is now all wrong. So I'm going to delete that now because it's irrelevant. Well, not just irrelevant, it's wrong. And maybe we'll move that bit up here. So as we don't get it muddled up with this misspelt comment about not being saved to the database. Right, so that's that. But we'll also need to change the service. So PO line service, and on the insert, we want to add the PO line tax ID. And on the update, we want to add that as well. Can I just copy that one? I think I can. Yes, that looks fine. We don't need to change the interface. I think that stays the same. Yes, no change there. But we will need to change here. When we save an order, is it the order? It's the order line. Yes. So when we save the order line, we want to pass the tax rate ID into the order lines collection. So let me copy that. And I think that should be it. So let's save everything and run the application to test it. We will need to add a new order now because I deleted the existing order so I could change the PO line table. Right, add an order. That's not what I meant to do. Let's add another one. Right, if we look at the second one, which has got some order lines on it, select edit, select the top row, select edit, and we've got the product, but we haven't got the tax rate. Let's see why that's not working. I'm going to start off by looking in SQL and to see if we have actually populated. Yes, so the line, it's got the tax rate there. So that looks all right. So let's go back here. I'm just going to rebuild the project. I'm now going to go back and just check that we're going to be using the PO line get by order, and we can, if we look at the PO header, I can guarantee this is going to be order number 1. It's going to be order number 2 actually. It's order, but the header ID is 42. Right, so we should be able to run this get by PO header by putting in the value of 42. For Douglas Adams fans, I think that's quite a coincidence, isn't it? And I think that's the problem, isn't it? We aren't returning the PO line tax ID. Right, okay. So I must have made a mistake when creating or when modifying that. So that's where I went wrong. Thought I did that. Perhaps I didn't execute it. Right, so that's corrected the SQL. Let's go back, run it again. Moment of truth. Yes. What a huge relief. Right, so you can now see we've got the standard tax rate. The tax rate is being populated, and so is the product. So that's all working fine. We can't actually save anything yet, but we'll come on to that in the next video. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope it hasn't been too tortuous. In the next video, we will, as I promise, we'll get on to saving changes that we make when editing an order. I'll put the link in the description to the Blazor code webpage that has documents this together with the code changes that we've made. If you've got any comments, please leave them in the comments section, and thank you very much for watching.